difficulties. Um, Here we go. So I'm definitely experimenting here. There are a lot of new things about what I'm doing on this one. So Miss Marvel, this is the first time I've tried a two-tone wash, or not a wash, a two-tone prime. So this base coat is primed with like a gunmetal silver on the bottom, and then I went from the top with a white to give some natural shadowing. I did that because I'm going to be using, you can hear me shaking my speed paint. I'm going to be trying some speed paint, especially for some of the more difficult areas, like the yellows that are very small. I'm going to see if I can get away with doing a speed paint over those areas and then coming back later with a little bit more defined color and seeing if I can just get like some highlights on there. But since those are like extremely small areas to get, I'm going to try going over it early with the speed paint and getting some of that more difficult definition. This is, I've used speed paints before. This is my first time using some of Army Painters. So let's see, which I guess what do other brands call them? I think definition paint, something like that. Um, let's see, it looks like her little bangle here is also yellow. Luckily for this first pass, I do not need to be careful at all, really. We're just getting it on here so that we can have some of these really fine details already established. I actually like how this yellow is looking. It's going to come across as a little bit more gold or orange, but I actually think that's fine. What card do you have here? I actually don't know. I would be willing to bet that her shoes have a little bit of gold down at the bottom. Let me see if I can find a card with that visually represented. I doubt her feet are a common source of attention. Nope. So I think we are winging it. I'm gonna go with red and gold, which is most of the accents on her, and the actual like fabric portion is going to be blue. So let's go ahead, throw on some yellow very liberally, and then we can come in careful with the red. She has those bands over the top of her feet that I think would look nice in gold. So if you're unfamiliar with my format here, it's very chill. I don't have the time or energy to make this super produced and really fancy. So basically, I get on most Fridays and I spend an hour painting because I would anyway. It's kind of time that I've set aside for myself to do something that I enjoy. And I figured, why not have it as a live stream if you want to chat or get on? I may or may not see the comments, but yeah, I'm just going to talk about a bit of my life, what's going on. I think these areas on the back are going to be gold because they wrap around from the front. Oh man, she has a little bit of gold on her collar here. Man, these are going to be some fine details to paint. So as you can see, this is really messy, and that is intentional. This speed paint tends to go everywhere anyway. It's really hard to control, and so we are just going to let it be messy at this stage, and then we can go in and clean up where we need to after. Luckily, most of the areas that are going to go over this are going to be red, and yellow and red will blend very nicely. So I'm also going to do her hair with this. I know that's probably not correct, but I think it'll just give me a nice base to work off of. Um, hopefully. Hopefully I don't regret any of this. I guess you can always just repaint it, right? Might be a little bit goopy with the extra paint, but I was actually very excited when they announced Miss Marvel. I think her costume was one of the coolest. The fact that they like integrated her actual hair into like the silhouette and structure of the costume, I thought was awesome. I mean, it would be really easy just to like throw a mask over and, and be like, yeah, her hair is somewhere. But the fact that it was integrated into the costume from the beginning, I'm like, yeah, that was the best choice. Okay. Oh, where's my water? Whoa! Hit the camera. Sorry about that. All right. Now I've got my water to wash off this speed paint. We'll see if I come back for more of that speed paint later. I'm rather unsure of whether I'll need that. All right, so pulling out my Army Painter Regiment brush. The Regiment brush is a very good overall, just general one. I'm gonna now move on to, let's see, I should move on to red, I think. Sorry, let me shake for a minute. Shaking paints is one of my least favorite things, which I know there are like the little metal BBs that you can put in there, and I should do that, but I honestly don't paint that often. I wish I painted more. All right, let's see. I'm going to water this down just a touch to get it the right consistency. It's a little watery. Yeah, I like that. All right, pardon me while I lean in here really close to get paint. Sometimes I'm like, why do I do this? I have a hard time talking and doing anything. And I used to play music in the background, however, a couple of my videos got removed for some kind of licensing issues, so now we will paint in silence. It's nice having the deep set eyes because I don't have to really worry about marking them up with red. Pretty easy to get around. So one of the things that I see, I watch a lot of painting videos. One thing that I see a lot of that just makes me cringe a little bit is when people put on too thick of layers. I definitely err on the side of a more wet palette, and usually have to do a couple layers, but I'll be honest, the effect is just so much better. The paint doesn't get all lumpy after you've done like those thick layers, and it's just so much more forgiving if you need to change anything. So I do recommend watering down your paints a little bit and getting a nice couple layers on there. I'm going to go up along this mohawk just a little bit more. Mixing speed paints and normal paints, I haven't done really, at least not a lot. And so it's something that makes a lot of sense to me. I feel like that's how it should be. Like some areas are made, or speed painting is made for some areas, but probably not all. Just because it's harder to control, it kind of goes everywhere. and it's just made to like blend everything together. Although how this red is covering up the speed paint is still looking like a bit of a mystery. So we'll see. I'm sure it'll work out. Maybe this one will be an epic failure. I'll delete this one, find another Captain Marvel to replace this one, and try again. It's also always an option. I'm sorry if this is a little bit blurry or out of focus. YouTube does not have the best dynamic focusing and stuff for live videos. Little chin straps and stuff like that are very difficult, and the Marvel United characters often have them. All right, so now I can see that this side where I started is drying a little bit. I love the color that's coming out of this. What is this? Pure red. So I have overall been very impressed with Army Painter's color mixes. I think that they just have a really nice, they're not like even this pure red, it feels just, I don't know, the saturation level on it is just on point, I think. It doesn't look too vibrant. Just feels like it meshes really well. And I think that's one thing that Army Painter was kind of founded around was their consistency of paint mixes. So a lot of their primers you can prime in exact matches of their color paints, and they should be seamless. All right, I'm gonna let the head dry a little bit more and move on to the shoulder pads. Shoulder pads, that's probably not what I should call them, but let's be honest, that's what they are. So, if anyone's interested, I watched The Sandman, which was very fascinating. Gave me like some serious supernatural vibes, and I actually, after watching it, I went back to Supernatural and started watching it again because I had taken a bit of a hiatus from Supernatural. And overall, I think I really liked it. The first half of the season felt like it had a little bit more direction than the second half, and I'm hopeful that moving into a new season, they'll just get more and more direction. But overall, I think it was worth a watch. And I'll tell you what, you guys, I know yellow and red is kind of an unfair judge because they already are so close on the color wheel that any mistakes or blemishes that run over onto this yellow speed paint are probably just very easy to overlook. But so far, I'm like, man, this speed paint had made it so easy to get some of those yellow highlights that I would have agonized over. We'll see once I accidentally hit some of them with blue or something like that. But right now, I'm like, thank heaven for that speed paint. And I will say, oh, got the hand there with some red. Army Painter provided me with these paints, so this is product placement and advertising. But I will say, like, I mean, I think you have your tiers of paint, right? Like Citadel is obviously a very flashy name. Um, I have not felt like anything with Army Painter's paints have been lacking. I appreciate that they aren't like the pop caps that you actually squirt them out. The reason for that is I I don't like the idea of my inks getting contaminated. my paints getting contaminated in any way. And I feel like if the lids can pop open like that, there's just a lot of opportunity for foreign colors and things to get mixed into them. If I accidentally dip my brush when I haven't washed it completely, stuff like that. So I do think it's better just to um, put it out onto a wet palette. It also allows for using your wet palette a little bit more easily. And getting the inside of this calf is a pain. Oh, I don't know if I can go from this side really. I think I got it. I'll have to come back in and cover that up with blue, but so yeah, while I am a walking advertisement for Army Painter, I do feel like it is my legitimate opinion that I like them just as much, if not more, in most areas than any other painting brand and painting supplies. Brushes are one thing that I want to try a bunch of other brands of. I can't say I've been blown away by Army Painter brushes, but I also like they're fine. They do the job. I probably need to replace my ultra fine detail one because it is getting a little bit frayed. I actually trimmed it with some really good scissors to try and get rid of some of the errant strands. Sorry, focusing, buffering. All right, yeah, these legs are a little bit messy. I'll probably come in and touch those up a bit. I'm hoping, let's see, how long have we been going? I am at 17 minutes. I think I only have about a half hour today, which is probably good because I don't know who would want to watch me for more than that long. I'm hoping to get a good base layer of my colors out here. Just coming along on the helmet now with a third pass. I think when I went over originally, my speed paints weren't really dry along the hairline there. And so they just kind of like washed together and didn't get a good clear definition between the two. So going back along that line especially, getting a second coat there and anywhere that looks a little bit thin. Oh man, I get so much satisfaction out of painting. And I know a lot of people are like, man, it's my worst nightmare. So stressful. But man, seeing it come together is so incredibly satisfying. Oh, forgot in between. So I'm actually going to switch over to my fine detail brush. I had forgotten about this, this area underneath the chin. It's a small area, so I'm expecting some errors, but let's see what I can do. I like to get it a little bit more wet and just kind of like touch it in there and let it run into the areas where it's supposed to, especially on a fairly high detail model like this one. A lot of times you can just like touch it in there and it'll go where it needs to go. I'm also going to make sure I get my finger in there to rub along these raised areas to get off any paint that I can. So I did get some red over there that I'll have to touch up, but overall that's not bad. It could have gone a lot worse. So one thing that I do want to try eventually is a complete covering of speed paint in all of the different areas, and then coming back through with paint and just cleaning up edges. I really think the effect would look nice. And I think it would just eliminate a lot of this like fine noodling in creases and trying to get into little areas that are kind of harder to get. While I have my red out, I'm actually going to switch back over to my regimen brush, and I am going to get that tassel, what do you call that, sash that's coming off of her belt. And then I think that covers most of my red layers, and then I'm ready to move on to blue for at least the base coat. And then we'll probably do one more coat and then move on to like shadows and highlights and washes and whatnot. One thing that is really, really fun about painting is when you get to this point where you feel like you understand where the brush is just going to go, and you can start, and just like with kind of a subtle movement of the wrist, you can just predict like where the brush is going to fold and wrap and land. And I don't know, it's like becoming one with your brush. It's a very satisfying moment when you feel like you know how it's going to go, then you try it and it works. Man, I'm sitting here like I can't wait to get the blue on there. All of this yellow and red looks awesome, but it really needs that blue to give it its rightful pop. Let's get a little bit more water. I feel like it's getting a little bit thick. I could just be very liberal on the base here and not worry about getting it on this like ground area, but it's easy enough to control, and when it's easy to control like that, I don't worry too much about it. I'm just like, if I can, I might as well put in a tiny bit of extra effort. Yeah, see, and then there, it ended up getting on there a bit, but this is all about like, it's easy for me to think about painting as like borders, right? Like you come up against a border and you're probably going to go over a little bit, but then you just come back a little bit later and you nudge the other one back in on that border. And it's a little like back and forth, a little bit of tug of war until you kind of get it on. All right, I think I'm ready for the blue. I don't know why, but my paint did not cover very well across there. Sometimes oils are introduced. Oh, her gloves, her hands are red. Never mind, I need to do her hands real quick. But sometimes oils are introduced onto your miniature, which is why it's really great to use some kind of holder like this. It's if you get oils on there, which your hands are just covered in oils, I'm sure you all know that. The paint just may not stick like it's supposed to. So going in and doing your hands right here, and trying to stay away from those yellow highlights that I did, because those yellow highlights are looking so good to me. I just really don't want to mess those up. And they're a speed paint, so they don't cover 100%. And so if I paint over them, it's not going to be the easiest thing to bring back. So let's see, her hand is looking pretty good. I may actually, in some of these areas, decide to get some red speed paint, because some of these creases are really hard to get into. And that red speed paint, because we would be putting it in a lower area where you don't have the raised areas, you could honestly just paint over it and then really quickly with a tissue or with your finger even brush over that area, the raised areas, and it would bring that yellow back out pretty nicely. So we'll see if we get to that. This is going to have to be part one. We'll see how part two comes out sometime next week or maybe before. If I need a painting break, I'll jump on a live video. I honestly don't watch many live videos very often, so I don't even know what to tell you as far as like how to get alerted when I go live. I do not schedule them very far in advance because this is kind of a break for me, and I just kind of jump on when I have the time. I'm going to bring up the computer and just make sure no comments are happening. Okay, let's see. For the longest time, I did not want to paint any of my board game minis, mostly because I wanted them all, like, I want it all or nothing, right? I can't have like a couple painted and then a couple not. And the commitment to sit down and paint all of them just felt like a lot for me. And once I started, it's been a very pleasant experience getting um, getting in and just painting each character. There's something that it does to the board game that's just like it feels very special to you, and just like I don't know, your copy of the board game all of a sudden just doesn't feel like something that's so replaceable, and I think that's awesome. I also don't play a lot of mini based games. They're not my favorite format. Generally, which Marvel United is an exception. Generally, they have like a very dungeon crawler feel, and I don't love I guess you could say I'm a little bit more of an abstract Euro style gamer, but looks like I missed some areas on the inside of this arm for the yellow speed paint. Ooh, there's a little crack that I cannot get the right angle on right in there. All right, so I had to come in a little bit too strong, and it got on some of the yellow highlights. So I tried to brush that off just with my finger. All right, and so now what we're going to do, I'm going to go back in with a tiny bit of this speed paint and try and get some of these areas I missed. I hope it doesn't mess with any of the red. Okay, looks all right. Over here. I'm actually not sure. I actually think her arm in there is supposed to be red. So there's always areas that I realize I missed. I'm so anxious to get onto the blue though. Oh man, I said only a half an hour and we're at 29 minutes. So we may not get to the blue today, which maybe that'll be fine, especially since wet palettes will keep your paint usable for days, but probably not much past that. So I think I have come back to it like after a week. The unfortunate part is it generally is a little bit sticky. You kind of have to like get past a little bit of like a buildup, and then you can dig down to wet paint underneath. But a wet palette is, in my opinion, the only way to paint. You just have so much control over the consistency of your paint that you normally wouldn't, because the manufacturer just makes it at a certain viscosity. And sorry, I know I'm off of the camera a lot here. It's difficult to get the angle that you need. Oof, I went too high on that side. I'm gonna have to cover that up with flesh tone. Flesh tone is so hard on minis. Trying to find the right skin tone, and it just does not cover other things very well at all. So now I'm just grabbing a little bit, since I already have paint on my brush, just going over some of these little areas, seeing if I need to nudge them a little bit closer to the border of this speed paint yellow, which I think is called Zealot Yellow. Oh, that shoulder did not get covered very well at all. Because if I'm not getting to blue today, I should just lean in and really get the red well. And then I hopefully won't have to really come back to the red until I'm ready to throw in some highlights. Yeah, the top of this yellow area, I'm definitely going to need to do a little bit of touch up, which I'll already want to do a little bit because just for highlights. So while these speed paints do grab highlights pretty well, they do better on applying shadows. All right, I have a lot of nice yellow and red going on. I am anxious for blue, but I think I might need to move on. So one thing that I'm really liking about how this turned out, I mentioned that I did a gunmetal initial primer, and then I went over from the top with a little bit of white primer, just sprayed from the top. What that's done is that, combined with the speed paint, this Zealot Yellow speed paint, it's kind of given me a nice gold color that I didn't have to work very hard for. Metallics kind of go on a little bit differently than other paints, and it's been nice to just be able to just do that speed paint really quick, and since it's over kind of a metallic base, it's gone on in kind of like a shiny goldish color, which works really well for Captain Marvel. I know that that is supposed to be gold, and I might do a couple gold highlights here and there, but overall, I really like the look. My painting style is a little bit less vibrant. Excuse me. Is a little bit less vibrant than most. I prefer some muted colors, and that's just a realism thing that I prefer. I feel like it looks like it's a little bit battle worn, like it's not perfect. I'm not super into like the pristine looking, unless that's how it's supposed to be, but I definitely prefer a little bit more on the side of it just looks how you might come across an imperfect individual. Even a superhero. And I'm using way too small of a brush for this area, but it's already red and I'm not doing much. I'm just putting a little bit of extra paint on this sash because there are areas that are looking just a little bit thin and inconsistent, because I've only done the one coat. So this is just going over with the second coat, making sure I got all of the necessary regions. And then I think next time we will be ready to throw some blue on here. We'll see how long I can wait. When I'm done painting, I just set this in its stand up beneath my computer and I just stare at it all day while I work, and so it usually doesn't last very long before I want to finish it. I will try and do that on a live stream. Um, a lot of times it's just when I need a mental break. It's a good way to just pull out my paints. A wet palette allows for that really nicely because my paints are already there and they're ready. I usually don't have to pull them out again. So, um, yeah, here we are. Miss Marvel. I'm loving the way she's looking. The blues should not be super complex. There are some little crevices and creases, and because of that, I may choose to pull out blue speed paint and do it from there first, just to get blue to run right up against those creases. So all I have to do is come in with then my deep blue, probably, or whichever one matches. Um, and then just cover up some areas so it doesn't look so thin. But overall, I'm loving it. I'm so excited to get highlights on that hair. Yeah. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.